Hello, everybody. I hope all of you are able to see me. So let me start with the presentation. And yes, so we are going to discuss about attention span. And to introduce myself, I am Karthik Rao. I am a pediatric physiotherapist. I work with children with special needs. And I have more than 15 years of experience working with children with special needs. I have a certification in sensory integration from the United States, and I've been working a lot with children with autism, with hyperactive kids, as well as children with cerebral palsy and intellectual disabilities. So today's presentation, we are going to discuss about attention span. Right? And in my experience, I've always found that irrespective of the type of disability or the developmental disorder we have, we always find that attention span is a common problem in children with special needs. So here we discuss about that. I guess the screen is coming in way, so I'll just move it to the side and let's move on with the presentation. The learning objectives for this webinar would be to understand the types of distraction, so that and identify appropriate strategies to overcome distraction, choose or modify activities based on the child's ability, predictably end an activity to help the child to understand task completion, and enable the child to work independently and willingly. So this is what we are trying to achieve through this webinar. So I would like to welcome you all for this program. And so wherever you are, it's a good morning or a good evening. And thanks for joining. So attention is a skill that is required across activities such as fixing a puzzle, catching a ball, writing, or constructing a castle on the beach sand. So whatever we do, we need attention. Attention is something of paramount importance, and I don't think I'll have to say much about that, because if we do not attend to something, we do not learn. So attention is the basic skill which is required for learning any skill or anything for that matter. So attention is a prerequisite for learning, and hence they develop secondary learning difficulties due to lack of attention. So when we talk about secondary learning difficulties, it means that these children typically have the potential to learn. They know, they have the intelligence to understand abstract concepts, but because they're not attending, they're not able to learn. So I was looking for a proper code, and I think this one suits better for this presentation. By prevailing over all obstacles and distractions, one may unfailingly arrive at his chosen goal or destination. This was said by Christopher Columbus. And as it clearly tells you, if we are not distracted, then we reach our destination. The moment you are distracted, we are everywhere and we do not reach where we want to go. So basically, I'm looking at how we're going to work for attention. So the first thing that comes to my mind is the distraction. So there are two types of distraction. There's an intrinsic distraction and an extrinsic distraction. So we'll look more into what these mean. And basically, as you could look into this picture, you can see that there is some amount of overlap between intrinsic and extrinsic distraction, which means they are not mutually exclusive completely, but there is a amount of overlapping as well, which will get more and more clear as we get further into the presentation. The extrinsic distraction is one in which there is a presence of a rival stimulus that is competing for attention with the task at hand. I'm trying to talk to you over webinar and I get a phone call, or I do certain things, or somebody's calling me. So there's a rival stimulus that is competing for an attention. You're listening to this webinar, you get a phone call, somebody's knocking at your door, and all those kind of things. A child who wants to read, and now there is somebody else watching television, so the child is not able to concentrate. So there's a competition. There's a competition for a stimulus, and so the child is not sure which one is more important, and they get distracted. So basically, extrinsic distraction means the distraction because of the environment, because of things that are happening around me. So what can we do now? So when we see a child with extrinsic distraction, because you want him to write, you want him to fix a puzzle, or you want him to attend to you when you're talking to him, and then you find that he's not paying attention, he's getting distracted. So what can be done about it? The first step to do is a distraction-free room. Okay, so what does it mean? It means that the room should be small. Okay, there it should be so or if the house is small, you cannot afford to have a separate room for your child, then you can go for a distraction free corner. So what do I mean by that is you identify a corner where the child can be seated, then you rearrange the furniture if necessary. Most of the times I tell parents with a lower socioeconomic background to actually uh, take the almirah, the iron almirah they may have. They always keep it next to the wall. Just pull it slightly forward, let's say around 3 to 4 feet, and create a cabin behind the almirah for the child, so that now the child is in a secluded spot and there are not much distracting elements around the child. And the child should be made to sit facing the wall, not facing the entrance where people may be coming or passers-by might be moving from one place to another, and the child may get distracted. There should not be any wall hangings, no posters, no calendars. I would say even not even a clock, because the clock is always moving and that is very exciting to watch. Right? So children will get distracted by those things around. There should not be an external sounds like television or phone calls. And if there's a cupboard or shelf, it must be closed. If it is not a closed cupboard, you can always put a screen with a cloth. And the workspace, the table should be uncluttered. It should have only one thing that the child needs to do, which the child is doing right now. Okay, so the workspace should be uncluttered, and always encourage the child to replace items after use, put it back in the shelf, put back in the cupboard, and then pick up a new one, so that the child, the table is always clean and the child knows what he is doing. And the second strategy would be to avoid multiple items within a task. So what do I mean by this? Typically, we see there are 4-piece puzzles, 10-piece puzzles, or we play with building blocks. We usually play with activities or toys. There are which are numerous in numbers. Okay, so which means when I introduce something for the first time, if I use all the building blocks together, then the child is totally kind of lost. I have seen so many times whenever you try to blow bubbles, which children enjoy very much. You blow a bubble and ask the child to just pop out the bubbles, and you will find that the moment you blow like 4 bubbles, 5 bubbles together, the child is happy watching it and likes to watch it go all everywhere rather than trying to poke at it. But the moment you try to blow one bubble at a time, the child is totally looking at it and is like playing with it. He's totally involved with the task. So multiple items actually, it's kind of distracting. It's disorganizing. The child is not able to focus. Does not know what to see or which bubble to see. And the same can happen with building blocks, because then the child starts fidgeting or fiddling with those items, and you will find that so these multiple items are not good for attention. So you eventually want to go there. So which means always start small. You use 2 blocks, 3 blocks, or 4 blocks, and then gradually once the child develops those skill sets, then you can gradually increase the number of blocks. So lesser the number of blocks, it helps the child to clarify expectations, what is being expected out of me. It simplifies the task demands, so the child is able to be successful in the first few attempts itself. The third strategy would be using a locking chair. The locking chair is helpful for children when they uh, kind of are everywhere. They impulsively move out of place. They don't know what to do, or they are always on the run. So it helps them to be seated in a chair. So there are some do's and don'ts associated with the chair. What is first is that always associate the chair with a task demand. So whenever the child sits on a chair, there is a demand on the child. The child has to do a task. Once the task is completed, the child can come out of the chair. So in this way, the child will always understand that if I finish this work, I can come out. And always start with smaller durations, that is even 5 seconds or 10 seconds, so that we are not trying to be harsh on the child. And the child, because in the first few attempts, the child is not going to know what is being, how long is going to be there. So keep it short, can keep the activity very simple. So I've mentioned it as oversimplified task. I might just give them coins and ask them to put in the piggy bank and make it easy for them. Once they put, let's say 10 coins in piggy bank, 10 seconds, Once they've done it, they can come out. Do not use the chair as a punishment. Do not use it like the child is running, so you just pull him and you make him sit on a chair and then lock him. You may be successful for the first time. The next time is not going to sit. So we don't want the chair to be used as a punishment or to make him sit there without doing anything. Okay, there should always be a demand, and this demand should be very clearly uh, expressed to the child what he is supposed to do, and gradually inculcate independent work practices. What do I mean by this? Once the child starts getting into a chair, he starts working, he knows what to do. You start to move out. You don't be next to the child, and this will help the child to start working independent. Now he knows what he's supposed to do, how long he's supposed to do, and then once you are sure that he has mastered or he knows what is being expected, your presence is not required. In that sense, it will help independent work practices. Too many times we come across parents who tell us like the child is doing homework or handwriting or stuff like that only when the mother is around. The moment the mother goes to do some household chores or takes care of another sibling, the child stops writing. And it's important that the lock-in chair is a very good medium by which you can always tell the child, do this work. Once you're done, call me. I'll come and open the chair for you. And the fourth strategy would be to teach responsibility. It is important that the child should feel responsible. The child should know that the child should be able to make decisions, and the child should know, if I've chosen this, I have to face the consequences. Okay, and you always start with giving small responsibilities at home, like it could be locking the gate at the night, or it could be like serving a glass of water to some visitor who comes to the house, or it could be like putting soiled clothes in the washing machine, right? So these are simple tasks which are very effective and to teach the child and give them responsibility so that they start getting involved in household chores, right? Involve the child in his or her self-care activities, because again you eventually want them to be independent on their own. Encourage participation in household chores. Appreciate efforts even if they do not translate into outcomes. So whenever you find that a child is uh, giving the effort but probably does not know how to do, where to, keep appreciating him and help him. Eventually he will get there. Tell good things about the child to others in their presence, and so it's always good, like it's most of the times we appreciate the child directly. We may hug him, kiss him, or we just get him some tangible items, but it's also important that you tell only good things about the child uh, in his presence to others. So what it does is that the child feels good about himself and it develops his self-esteem. So a time comes when his self-esteem is so good, and then he thinks that I shouldn't be doing something silly like this. Okay, this is not what is expected. This will put me down in the eyes of others. So the child will start thinking of those lines. Once the child has developed a good amount of self-esteem, and always be genuine. Do not fake it. Do not appreciate for something which the child has not done. Children always sense it, and once you start doing it, the child will stop doing whatever gains he has made. And finally, responsibility overrides distraction. I'm sure all of us would have encountered these kind of experiences. Like when I was in I had finished my 12th grade, and I had an entrance examination for the medical and pre-medical and pre-dental. So the the next day was my exam, and the previous day there was a cricket match between India and Australia in Sharjah. I'm a cricket fan, so I was terribly missing it, but at the same time, I forced myself not to watch the match. Okay, and it happens with all of us. I mean, you wanted to watch a movie badly, and then at home, it's been telecast in television, and then some visitor comes, and then you switch off the television, right? So you always understand what is more important in life, and that kind of sense of responsibility will override distraction. So even as the child gets older and the child gets more and more responsible, he understands that even if I'm getting distracted, or he identifies this as a potential distraction and says that this is a distraction and I'm not going to focus on it. I'm going to do my work. Yeah. So that sense of responsibility has to be inculcated to the child, and it has to start from now. So the strategies to overcome extrinsic distraction would be uh, a distraction-free room, first of all, so that you do not have a visual field which is kind of too much of giving you too much of information, and avoid multiple items within a task. A locking chair is very helpful. And finally, teach responsibilities. Do not be overprotective or do not overdo or overhelp a child so that he doesn't take responsibility of his own life. You might be able to do it now, but what about 5 years down the line or 10 years down the line? At some point of time, you will feel for that. So it's and going back to the other point is in school it is not practically possible to teach one-on-one or to maintain a distraction-free environment. So ideally, in a room for children with autism or in an inclusive school, you should have a corner where the child can go and relax, and it's not visually it's uncluttered, and it should help the child to stay focused and complete a task. And at the same time, it is important that the child understands the demands of the classroom, what he's supposed to do, and it will help him. And if this sense of responsibility will help him to override distraction. The second kind of distraction is intrinsic distraction. Now, Viktor Frankl, he had said that when a person cannot find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. I'm sure we can easily relate this to children with special needs, that you will always find that the child, when you want, the children always do things that they think is important, and the things which are really important in life, which we want them to learn, they are distracted. Okay, and they, in that sense, they start doing a lot of self-stimulatory behaviors, which are essentially a pleasurable ones for them most of the times, right? And you can always find a distraction if you're looking for one. So even if you're in a closed environment where there's no sound and nothing to distract you, even then you will find children getting distracted by the pencils. They may start tapping, or they may just look at a particular the wall which has like a small paint that has peeled off the wall, and you can see all those kind of things, and you will always find a distraction if you're looking for one. So what is intrinsic distraction? The intrinsic distraction is something which is exclusive of the environment. What do I mean by this? It's like the intrinsic distraction is something which is not related to the environment. In other words, the child is either not ready or not willing to attend. As you could look into these two pictures, the child who's supposed to do something else with the pencil, he starts to put it on his head and tries to balance it. Another child who has to read is like finds it so boring that he keeps it on his head. So you will find that the child is not actually willing to participate or do the task that is expected out of him. So why are children getting intrinsically distracted? There could be many reasons for that. The first thing that I could think of is a physiological reason. The child is actually hungry, the child is sleepy, he wants to go to bed, and so he's not able to concentrate. And I'm sure we will do the same when if you are hungry or if you're feeling sleepy, you'll not be able to concentrate. So it's quite common. Yeah. The next common thing would be the ailments. Some common ailments like constipation, like cold, common cold. The child will not be able to concentrate. They'll be more or less restless. Okay. So that kind of that information will help you whether to know whether has the child passed motion today. Is that affecting his attention span? The third possible reason could be the under the influence of medications, because anti-epileptics always come with a side effect of drowsiness, a sleepy, sedative effect. And a lot of times when children take antibiotics, it affects their gut as well as it makes them restless. And or the other reason could be that the child does not understand what is expected out of him or her. You have tried your best to tell him what needs to be done, but the child basically does not know what am I supposed to do. I have this. It was a unique experience for me. I was actually working with a child, and I wanted. I was like we were playing with a drum, and I had a stick in my hand, and I gave him a stick. I hit the drum like 3 times, and I wanted him to hit 3 times. Okay, he was a child who was able to understand instructions, who was able to uh, understand counting, Yeah, he can count numbers and all those things. So everything was there as a prerequisite, which was required for the task, but the child was not able to hit the drum. I tried with one beat, I tried with two, then three, and all this kind of thing, but it didn't work. Later on, I realized that for the child to be able to hit the drum, the number of times I hit the drum, the child actually should be counting when I'm hitting it, right? So if I'm hitting it two times, I realized that he was like either not counting or he was like getting distracted, and he basically did not know that he is supposed to count when I'm hitting the drum. Okay, so the child was not able to complete the task because he was missing that particular link, even though he had all the potential elements which are required for completing the task. And the final thing is that the child is not interested in the task. It's so boring for the child that it's not able to concentrate. And here comes the overlap I was talking about. I told you that there is a overlap between intrinsic and extrinsic distraction. So when I find that the task itself is so boring, then I always try to look elsewhere. So I get a extrinsic distraction. So this is where there is a amount of overlap that's coming. So what can we do to overcome the intrinsic distraction? And as you could easily say that the extrinsic distraction compared to the intrinsic distraction, the extrinsic is much more easy to manage because the child actually is ready to concentrate, but he's getting distracted by external stimulus. But intrinsic distraction, the child is actually not ready to concentrate. Now that is much more difficult to work. Yeah. So how can we help the child in this such a situation? The first thing that we have to see is identify the time of the day when the child is at his best. Some of us are early birds, some of us are night owls. The same applies to children with special needs. Some of them are active in the morning, they wake up at 4 in the morning, and some of them like they go to bed at night, 1 a.m., whether you call it morning or night, as late as that, right? So they'll be at their best at around 11 p.m. and for some children it's around 7 a.m. or it could be any time during the day. So it's always good to identify what time the child is at his best, and if the child is taking medications, usually you have the anti-epileptic medications given either once a day or twice a day, which means they will have once in the morning and once in the night. So afternoon time would be a good time to teach them. Mornings they'll be drowsy and nights they're going to sleep. So afternoon would be a good time for them to actually sit and concentrate. And finally, and it also applies to children with hyperactivity who are under medications. Now, for these children, if you're giving them medicines in the morning to improve their attention, then the sessions or the training should be in the morning. And there's no point if the child goes to a therapy or a class only in the afternoon. And also make sure that the child is not under any physiological stress, which means about constipation as well as about sleep or hunger. The next thing that you can do is always establish a routine. And I feel this is the basic that we can do. Routine and repetition form the core of or the most basic instruction. Yeah, so I'll repeat it. Routine and repetition. These are the core mantras by which you will actually able to teach anything that you want the child to learn. A routine can overcome the limitations of poor intelligence and or language delays. The child is not able to follow instructions, no problem. The child is not able to understand upon the meaning of a particular word, no problem. You might not be able to teach him the concept of privacy. The child does not know that he should not move without clothes. So he should not be naked in the house. That it's very difficult to teach a child such things. But you can always teach them through routine. You always make sure that whenever you take the child to the bathroom to bathe him, let's say even when as a child is as young as 2 years or even lesser than that, you take the child inside, close the doors, and then undress the child, give him a bath, then put a towel around him, take him out, close the room door, and then undress him. If the child gets used to these kind of routines, you don't really have to teach him the concept of privacy. In other words, like the child may not know why we are doing it, but the child knows what to do. It's relatively easier. A routine sets expectations. It really clearly tells the child what needs to be done. And once a routine is established, you do not have to think. So for children with intellectual disabilities who are not able to apply their minds depending on the situation, its routine is very even more easier. You have to always remember you have always have to do the same thing again and again, and then you don't have to even think about it. It becomes automatic. Yeah, so now you know where you have to keep your footwear the moment you enter into your school. It becomes easy. The next thing that needs to be focused on to overcome intrinsic distraction would be task. And I find this as the most important thing, or the most important missing link in working with children with special needs. Um, so what is this? So the first thing is task completion. Every child it's important that the child needs to know that I have to complete a task before I move on to the next task. Now, this is very commonly seen in children with autism as well as in children with hyperactivity, that they move from one task to another without actually completing it. And what I realized over a period of time working with children is that I would stick on to a task only if I know when the task is going to end. Yeah. So what happens is that the child has to know when the task ends even before he starts. Because let's look at this from an adult's perspective. Do we engage in any task and in which we do not know when it's going to end? Today, you know that the webinar is from for 1 hour. It may extend for half an hour. We don't know depending on the questions, but you will know there is an end to it, and you know it's what is the likely time it's going to end. You go to office, you go to work, you know how long you're going to be there. You know you're going to be back home by 7 p.m. or 9 p.m. depending on your shift timings. You go to you take a vacation, you book the return tickets, right? So at all points of time you always know when the task is going to end even before you start. But what happens with children with special needs? We either don't tell them when it's going to end, or we assume that they will not be able to understand, and so we don't really try to make them understand. So what needs to be done is, the first thing is, the child needs to know when the task will end even before they start. Now, for that to happen, and for a child with special needs who has limited understanding, both in terms of intelligence as well as in terms of language, it is important that the child knows when the task is going to get over. So, we try to understand task as three types. Any task in the world, we can always fit into these three categories. There are tasks that are ending, there are tasks that are non-ending, and there are tasks that are repetitive in nature. Okay, so working with children, I can probably say like ending tasks are those in which you do a cleanup, right? So you have some items in the uh, on the floor, on your cleaning up. You played with the toys and you just need to keep it back. So you just clean up. So it becomes easier. And then the other example would be jigsaw puzzle. A jigsaw puzzle would be like a 4 or 5 pieces together, and you join them together and you will find a single image. Now that's a ending task. So it's easier. Once you do it, it's over. So it's easy for children to understand. Now there are certain tasks which are like non-ending. For example, swing, right? Now you can swing for 2 minutes, you can swing for 2 hours. There's no end to it. So the problem here is that the child, and it's commonly seen, you take the child to a park or a playground, the child does not want to come back home. The moment you try to take him back, he creates a big scene. He wants to stay there for as long as possible. Now, for an ending task like swing, or it could be like on a slide, the child gets on the steps, gets down through the slide, and then goes back. So it goes in a loop. So there's no end to it. And the third category is a repetitive task. Now, this repetitive task is actually dicey, because repetitive tasks are those which are essentially ending, which we adults convert into non-ending. Okay, let me repeat it. Repetitive tasks are essentially ending tasks, which we convert into non-ending. So these are tasks which require practice. Okay, so as you can look at this, you will find that I've put the same example of jigsaw puzzle in both ending as well as in repetitive. So what does it mean? Is inherently ending task, but because we want the child to learn how to fix the puzzle, the child may not be able to learn it in the first attempt. So the child may need to do it again and again to actually learn how to do it. The same applies for handwriting, the same applies for stacking rings, and you will find that the so which means we are going to repeat the activity again and again. Now this the problem here is that the child thinks it's an ending puzzle, ending activity. He does not like puzzles, okay, and he is finding it very difficult to fix it. And what happens is he, with your help, he is able to fix it. And the moment he is done with it, what happens? You just take it out and ask him to do it again. So this creates a lot of frustration. The second time he may still do it. You do it for the third time, he just throws up and throws it away, and he then shows a tantrum. So what you will find is that there is a conflict. This conflict essentially is because the child did not understand when the task is going to end. You may have uh, something in mind. Let him do this 5 times, or let him do it for 5 minutes. But you either did not communicate with the child, or the child is not able to understand numbers. The child does not understand what is 5 minutes or what is 10 times, right? So these kind of things makes it very difficult for a child to understand. So why do we need to have a task completion? The task completion essentially, it's like you want the child to run a race and you're showing a finish line. Okay. With this, if you don't show the finish line, what do you expect the child to do? Some children would run as long as they want, and then they will just come out of the track. And for some children, they will not even start, right? So task completion gives them a goal, it gives them a target. They know what to do and how long they're going to do this task. So it is ideal for improving your sitting tolerance, because children now know that they have to put these 10 coins inside the piggy bank in a lock-in chair, and once they do that, they can come out of it. Okay, so for that 10 seconds he's sitting, and gradually you will obviously increase the complexity of the task as well as the duration of the task. The child should know when the task ends even before it starts. Okay, every task should have a beginning, a process, and an end. The task should always proceed towards the end. So what happens in a non-ending task like a swing or a slide is always it runs in a loop. So there's no end. It does not proceed towards the end. Okay, we want that to proceed towards an end, and the child should experience the high of having accomplished something, because now this child has had this experience of almost like tasting different things but never completing a meal. It's almost like that. He is uh, he has done a puzzle but he has not completed it. He plays in the swing, then he comes out of it on his own. Then he plays with the ball for 2 minutes, and then he's not interested. So what happens is over a period of time he has tried and tested everything and is totally not happy with what is happening, or he just follows his free will. He has never accomplished something. So this puts him down, this puts his confidence levels down, because he thinks he's not good at anything. So what can be done about it? So for ending tasks like cleanup, it's always easy for a child to understand. So it's we can just ask him to do, and if a child starts doing it for a couple of times, he understands how long this good task is going to last. The next is a non-ending task. So for that, we are going to use a timer or an alarm. You can use a mobile phones if the child is not distracted by mobile phones, or you use a separate timer, which could be manual or electronic, and fix a time. Like you're going to swing for 10 minutes or you're going to swing for 2 minutes. And for the child to understand, I always start with 30 seconds. I put the child on a swing for 30 seconds, use an alarm, and once the alarm rings, I ask the child to get down, switch off the alarm, and then go and sit on a chair and do some very small activity for 10 seconds or 20 seconds, and then come back, sit on the swing, another 30 seconds on the swing, and the cycle continues. I do this 3 or 4 times till the time I see that the child, on hearing the sound of the timer or alarm, the child gets down from the swing on his own. He knows it's time to get down and have to move. Yeah. So the timer is very helpful, and once the child understands the purpose of a timer, You can gradually increase it to 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or half an hour or 1 hour. So I would suggest that even for children who do not come from a park, or even after 1 hour, use this as a strategy in which you train them with the timer, and eventually they once they hear the sound of the timer, they know it's time to go home. The third category is repetitive tasks. And as I told you, these are tasks which require repetition and practice. So which means we want the child to do this 5 times, 10 times, and the child is not actually able to know how many, what is 5 and what is 10. So the child will not be able to do it if you say do it 5 times. So what do? We use coins and a piggy bank. As you could see in this picture, we can probably keep like 5 coins next to a task. And for example, let's take the example of a jigsaw puzzle. The child has to fix those puzzles, and then he puts 1 coin inside the piggy bank and say 1 time over. And then we undo it and ask him to do it again. So he puts the second coin and puts it inside the piggy bank. Now the child knows that as long as the coins are there, I have to do this task. Okay, the child may still not know counting, so you can do this for children as young as 2.5 years old who understand. So they will be able to understand that as long as the coins are there, I have to do this task. So after once the 5 coins are over, the task is over, they come out of the chair. Yeah, so once they and you start working with this, at some point of time you will also feel that after 5 attempts, 5 coins, the child is almost on the verge of learning how to fix a puzzle. If I do one more time, he'll be able to learn on his own independently. But don't fall into the trap, because the child you will lose the trust of the child, because you have told him 5 times, you have to stick with 5 times. Once you have done 5 times, take him out, let him do, or let's say for example even swing for 30 seconds, go back to the chair and do the same activity another 5 times. It's still perfectly fine, but he has to move out of the chair after the designated number of coins are over. The other thing which goes important hand in hand with the task completion parameter would be the quality of the task. So every task should have a minimum standards of quality without which the task never gets completed. So as I had told you, the first thing is every task should have a beginning, a process, and an end, which means the task should always move towards completion. Okay, now the child knows when the task is going to end. If it is swing, you're going to use a timer. If it is like a puzzle, you're going to use coins to make him do 5 times or 10 times. It could be putting cups one inside the other, or it could be like stacking rings. Again, anything which requires practice, you will use coins. Now, the quality is important, which means if the child is not giving the required quality, you will never allow the child to complete the task. Which means again, if the child is not able to stack the rings, you will not put the coin inside. So which means the task is not going to get completed. Why this is important? Because sometimes children just try to finish the activity without giving it the due diligence or due attention. They just want to finish it for the sake of finishing it. The same applies for handwriting. They want to write fast. They're not concerned about spelling mistakes or even writing within the lines. Right? So a quality parameter is very important, and the child will be able to learn only when the required quality is good enough. So quality is more important than quantity. So which means instead of asking a child to do or write 10 times a particular alphabet, you can ask them to write 2 times, but both the times should be correct. If it is wrong, then the task is not completed. You might erase it and ask him to write again, or you may just cross it and tell him to write again. As Shiv Khera put it in the book, You Can Win, practice makes a man perfect only when we practice perfectly. So an imperfect practice, even if you practice 100 times, you are not going to learn how to do it the right way. So what happens when you give a task completion? When you have a very clearly designated end to a task, it has a double benefit. If the task is to the child's liking, a predetermined ending would encourage willingness to let go. The child likes to do the task. For example, child likes to play with the ball. Okay, but you say that we're going to play catch and throw for 10 counts, yeah, or you're going to catch a ball 10 times and then we are going to move on. Then what it helps us, it encourages the child to let go. We are going to do it for 10 counts and then we are done with it. So this sustains interest in the task or object for a longer time. We see this even with children who are typically developing. You get them a new toy, they will take it to the bed, they'll sleep with it for the next 2 days, it will be with them 24/7. After 2 days, it's somewhere else. Yeah, they don't even bother to see where it is. They get so used with that, or probably uh, use it so much that they lose interest in the task. So it is important that when you have a fixed end, the child will be interested to continue this again and again for a longer period of time. And it promotes delayed gratification. What does it mean? Is that I know something, I want this, but I can wait for it. Okay, that is delayed gratification. If the child does not like the task, it helps in developing tolerance. Now that the child knows that he does not want to do this task, but he knows there's an end to it. So what happens? He develops tolerance. This happens with us all through the uh, through various examples in our day-to-day life. You will find that you got a flat tire. You're not able. You're going in a two-wheeler. You're in a motorcycle, and then you got a flat tire, and if there's a mechanic shop next to nearby, you will have the courage or the strength to push your motorcycle. So you may not like doing it in a hot sun, but you don't have a choice, and at the same time, you know there's an end to it. If you don't know where the mechanic shop is, I'm sure you're not going to move. You'll try to reach for somebody, and somebody has to come in, pick you up, or you'll find out other means of doing the task or managing the situation. Or if you have a dead rat in the house, okay, you have to get rid of that. You cannot keep it in the house, and nobody tries to pick up a dead rat with all the willingness, but we develop tolerance. Okay, so when you know there is an end to a task or there's an end to a misery, you will develop tolerance. It gives you the strength. The other strategy to overcome intrinsic distraction would be to make the task interesting. As I had mentioned you, if the child finds the task not interesting, so what can you do about it? The first thing that you can do is always look at a just right challenge. Now, what does it mean? It tells you that whatever we do, every task throws up a challenge. Okay, it could be cooking, it could be talking on a webinar like this, it could be working in the office and trying to finish a project within a stipulated time. It could be like completing an exam paper within 3 hours. Everything is a challenge. Okay, and if the challenge is too easy, it's something like you can do it just like that, it is boring. I mean, you would not want to do things which are so easy for you to do because you think it's a waste of time. Okay, and you don't basically learn anything out of it. And the other end, it is too difficult. You know this is not going to uh, help, or you will not be able to make it. In such instances, you will find that you're not motivated enough, and it's too much of a challenge. Let's say if you are playing a cricket match, if you're watching a cricket match between India and Afghanistan versus India and South Africa, okay, a one day international, then obviously you will prefer to watch a match between India and South Africa than a match between India and Afghanistan, because the results are more likely to be predictable in a match against Afghanistan, whereas in the match against South Africa, you will find that the results are unpredictable. So it is always important that the challenge has to be just right. It cannot be too easy. It should not be too difficult. Now, if let's assume you're just getting into this picture and you're traveling from the one end of the spectrum, that is too easy towards too difficult, and you give a task to the child, and the child is able to do the task easily. And once he's able to do it easily, you increase the complexity of the task. You make it more challenging, and the child is able to do it. Okay, so let's give an example. Think of an example in which you are asking a child to throw a ball at a target. Okay, now the target could be empty water bottles which you have just stacked up on a stool, or an elevated platform, and asking the child to throw the ball at it, and he has to knock it down. the distance between the child and the target is, let's say, 2 feet, that could be too easy for the child. The child is successful. If the child is successful for any task for 100% of the time, that means he tries 10 times, he's successful all the 10 times, then it is boring. There is nothing the child learns out of it. Okay, so at a distance of 2 feet, the child is able to do it 10 out of 10. And then what you do is you increase the distance by 1 more feet. So the child now has to throw at a distance of 3 feet. He's doing it well again, 10 out of 10, right? And then you increase the distance by 1 more foot, and it becomes 4 feet. Now the child encounters failure. Okay, so now this is the point which you would want to stay on, because now the child who has been successful from the 2 feet distance, at 3 feet distance, his confidence level is pretty high. And at this point of time, the first sign of failure, okay, it increases their motivation. They want to succeed because the confidence level is high, and they would say, like, how am I not able to do it? Let me try, give my best shot. So you'll always find that the child will do his best at the first sign of failure, when he has had an successful an experience of having tasted success all through. Okay, so if I look at the point I mentioned, the point at which the child starts to fail is just right. Okay, the point at which the child starts to fail is just right. And here you will find that the just right point is not a static point. What do I mean by that? It's that a 4 feet may be just right for the child, because he has so far practiced 2 and 3 feet, and 4 feet was the first point at which he started to fail. And now after practice, after keeping it there for some time, now he has mastered 4 feet, able to throw at a target at a distance of 4 feet. Now you will find that the 4 feet is not, it's become easy for the child. Now you have to increase the distance to 4.5 or 5 feet. So the just right is not a fixed point. It has to be a dynamic point. And how do you decide? I would always say follow a rule of three. If the child is successful 3 consecutive attempts, then increase the complexity. If the child fails 3 consecutive times, decrease the complexity. You don't want to frustrate a child. It could be too hard. Now, at some point of time, you decide that he is able to do 2 feet, 3 feet. Now I increase it to 4 feet, and he has encountered failure for the first time. That's fine. For second time, failure. For third time, failure. Then the fourth time, you make it, instead of 4, make it 3.5. So you make sure that you don't want to frustrate the child. At the same time, probably you thought that 4 feet is just right for the child, whereas 3.5 feet is actually just right for this particular child. So this just right point varies from person to person. It varies from depending on your past experience, depending on what kind of activities you have done, what is your attitude, and what is your frustration tolerance. Are you able to take frustration easily, or you get even the first sign of failure actually puts you down? So a lot of factors depend on the outcome. So what are the variables that you can look at? The variables could be distance, the variables could be speed, it could be shape, it could be size, weight, etc., and etc., which means a lot of things that you can see in which the child is able to, we can always manipulate the complexity of the task, make it easier or make it more and more difficult, and by adjusting these variables. And how do you make the task interesting? You can make the task interesting by providing a feedback, and the feedback should be given in a way the child understands. Because when you want a child to learn something new and you're trying to give a feedback, if the child does not understand the feedback, the child will not be able to self-correct. So what is feedback? Feedback essentially is a way to let the child know whether he's doing it right or wrong. Okay, so feedback, an example of feedback would be an examination, right? Where the teacher will know whether the student has really understood a concept or not, right? So feedback the exam is a feedback for the teacher. Similarly, when you want to give a feedback to the child, you should always make sure the child is able to understand the feedback. Now again, I look at feedback as two different types. One is an internal feedback and one is an external feedback. So what is the difference? The internal feedback is the one in which the child is able to get the feedback from the task itself. I'm trying to stack a cup one on top of the other and it falls down. So I understand that somewhere down the line I have made a mistake and it's so that I was not successful. So this feedback is internal feedback. And what is an external feedback? Many times we see the child is trying to fix a puzzle on the board and he's looking at the parent. He just looks up and he's trying to fix the puzzle without looking at the board. Now what is happening? The child is not able to appreciate the feedback he's getting from the puzzle board and he's looking for a feedback from the external source, which is essentially a person. Okay, so it's the parent most of the times. So when you see that the child is looking at you and not looking at the board, it tells you the child is not getting a feedback from the task itself. So I always try to see where at which level the child is. I just try to put it into three levels. In the first level, the child does not know if he has done it right or wrong, and does not understand when you point it out. You're saying that this is wrong. You're not sure. You always tell the child look down, concentrate, and all those are high-fi words. And then you see that the child is making the same mistakes again and again. It clearly tells you that the child has not understood the demands of the task. In such a thing, the first that what you have to do is modify the task. So change the task. Don't give the same task because the child is not at a level of understanding the demands of the task. Example, if you're trying to do buttoning and if the child is not looking at the buttonhole and trying to insert the button, instead of telling him to look down and concentrate on that, first thing I would like to see is, can he put a coin inside a piggy bank? These two are very similar tasks, but putting a coin inside a piggy bank is much more simpler and easier and compared to buttoning. But if that skill is not achieved, I cannot go on to buttoning. So that is where I would like to start. And probably I would then try to keep the piggy bank next to the child's buttonhole and ask him to put the coin inside and see if he's able to bend his neck and then try to look down and put the coin inside the piggy bank. Yeah. So, and once he's able to do, I move into buttoning. In the level 2, the child does not know if he has done it right or wrong, but understands when you point it out. So the child does it, he's more intended in finishing the task and he doesn't actually check his work. Okay, then you are able to tell him that this is wrong and then he realizes, okay, I've done this wrong, and then he changes it. But the child is not able to appreciate or does not actually understand how to check whether he has done it right or wrong. So you have to modify the feedback mechanism, which means like, how do you know it's wrong? Is probably you are telling him that he has to join two lines when he's writing S within a double line. He has to touch the top line as well as the bottom line. If he's not able to touch it, you can probably put small hyphens in a different color on those particular two lines and then ask him to see if the S that he has written touches those red colored lines on the top and the bottom. So try to make it much more objective, or in other words, like you want him to do an addition and let's say you want him to do a carryover. 18 plus 15 is 33, and so you give him a sum of 18 and 15, and then instead of telling him that he's right or wrong, you write the answer in another piece of paper, keep it somewhere else, and tell him once you have done it, you check it out. If you don't find it, and then once you've checked it, you look for the answer here in this bit paper, which I've kept it here, and see if it is right. Then you're done with it. If you're wrong, I'll have to give you one more sum. Okay, try to make it much more objective so that the child does not feel that he's being vindicated, and you're trying to just make him sit longer and longer. Or the third category is in which the child is able to review his or her work and is able to self-correct. Now, this is the point at which I always try to work with the child is, can I see self-correction? I say a child is trying to fix a circle in a board, shape board, and he's trying to fix a circle in a square slot meant for the square, and then he tries it for some time and then he realizes this is not fitting in, and he takes the circle and puts it in the place for a circle. Now, if I see this self-correction, it means the child is able to appreciate the feedback that is getting from the board, and this is the child who is now ready for independent work practice, because now he can do the work without my presence. So if you find that the child is in either level 1 or level 2, do not blame the child for not doing it independently, because essentially he thinks that I'm not able to do this activity, and child is not able to do it, and he completes your work, his writing work, and then you come and see, you come and tell him that this is not right, and you erase everything. Then he thinks that even if I do when my mom is not around, she's going to come and tell me that this is wrong, and she's going to make me do it all over again. So in such a case, it's always better to do it in her presence. So that's what happens. So if you find the child is able to self-correct, then encourage independent work practice. So the other strategy to make the task interesting would be to focus on sensory preferences. So choose a sensation that gives better feedback. Example, in auditory feedback for children with low vision. I think it is self-explanatory. The other thing is identify the sensory input that the child is seeking. We know children with special needs have a lot of sensory seeking and sensory avoiding behaviors. If the child is avoiding touch experiences, the most likely child would be seeking proprioceptive inputs, right? So instead of trying to give him input which the child is avoiding, always give input based on the task or based on the sensory system which the child is seeking. Now, in that sense, you will not have a starting trouble. The child will be ready willingly. He'll be ready to get on a task which he is seeking. So if the child is vestibular seeking, activities on the swing, so the same puzzle board can be done while swinging. So in that sense, the child will be able to concentrate much better. The other way of making task interesting is always look at what the child knows based on his past experiences. The one important factor here is that the child should taste instant success. Okay, all the while we learn that failure is the first step to learning and to be successful, right? But that is not the case in children with special needs, and they encounter a lot of failures. They have to, and as we know, like even simple things that we want them to do, like buttoning a shirt, or even like filling a glass of water from a water can or a jug, they spill it over, right? So even small things are so difficult for them, and so they encounter failure a lot of times, that the first sign of failure always puts them down. So anything new they try, if they're not able to do it even for the first time, they are kind of lost, or they give up immediately. So failure is not the first step to learning in children with special needs, which means we have to start with instant success. What do I mean by this? Simplify the task so much that it's obvious for them that it will be very easy and they'll be successful. If I take the example of a jigsaw puzzle, if there are 4 pieces and they have to join those 4 pieces to fix the puzzle, fix 3 pieces and give them the fourth piece. All they have to do is only fix the single piece, the fourth piece, and the task is completed. So once they are able to taste success, they are into the game. They naturally get involved in the task, and then you fix 2 pieces and they fix the other 2 pieces. So gradually increase the complexity. And grade task from simple to complex. Start with too easy level if the child is low on confidence. So when I said just right, that is for most of the children. But if you find the child is reluctant to try anything new, start with too easy level. It should be so easy that the child thinks that it's so easy. I would let me better try do this than crib about it. To summarize it, the strategies to overcome intrinsic distraction would be to identify the time when the child is ready to learn, establish routines. So routines and repetition would be the basis. You can teach almost all the concepts which does not have application, which does not change according to the situation. Insist on task completion. Use task completion parameters to teach them whether it's an ending, a non-ending task, or a repetitive task, and use appropriate strategies. Make the activities interesting. Provide just right challenge. Make it sensory based on the sensory preferences that they have, and they should taste instant success. So I would like to mention a few words about Autism Connect. Autism Connect is the world's first digital platform which brings together more than 70 million people, parents of children with autism, and they're doing a good job, great job here. And they're trying to bridge the gap between the parents and the professionals. And so, whatever actions that you want to take, this proactive, you always know what are the pros and cons, so it helps you to be proactive. And if you want to know more about Autism Connect, you can visit the website www.autismconnect.com. And now I can take questions. You can find my details here. So let me answer your questions. I guess I'll need some help with this. Yeah, questions. I'll try to answer the questions from the beginning. Okay, I have a question from Julie Khadapkar. If a child starts to do a self-stimming behavior, then do we stop it and get him back to the task, or we wait for him to come back? If a child is showing a self-stimulatory behavior, the first thing that we have to see is what is the alertness level of the child. And I would say that the behavior itself will tell you if the child is kind of shaking the hands. Then you will know it will more likely to be visual as well as or proprioceptive shaking. If the child is rocking, it would be like a vestibular shaking. If you see any such behavior, I would immediately, for example, if the child is doing vestibular shaking behavior, rocking, then I would put the child on a swing and help him to move, so that I am able to give the input that the child is seeking. And then once the child is able to get what he wants or she wants, then I will like to introduce more and more complex tasks, like when the child is swinging, the child has to pick up an object or throw at a particular target or things like that. I think if you just wait for the child to stop, it's not going to really work. At the same time, uh, we have to basically give them the input that they are seeking in a meaningful way. The next question, my child is adamant on completing the task, like flipping all pages of a book before moving on to the next task. How to break this monotonous or stereotypical behavior? Um, Now this child has got into a habit of doing this. So the first thing that I would encourage you is to use a book which is exclusively only for flipping all pages, which means he's not going to flip the pages of all the books that he's going to come across. If he wants to flip pages, he has to just flip one particular book, and I will give him that particular book before he uses some other book. For example, you want him to read a story book, then you, before that, you give that particular book, let him flip it and use a timer, because I would want to him to just move on. So 30 seconds or 1 minute, and once he's done with it, then you take another book and start reading it. So what will happen is, the advantage here is that you will find when you choose a restrict the child who flips all the books to a particular book, the child will you will be able to regulate it, because if the child starts doing with all the books, you cannot regulate it. So the first thing is, you restrict it to one single book, and then you regulate it, which means now you will have a specific flipping time. Okay, before every book that he reads, you give him that particular book, the flipping book. He flips it, 30 seconds, use a timer, and once that is done, go with reading. And once so that sense, you will be able to, the child will get what he wants, and you will be able to break the monotony. And then you can keep the book aside and use it an hour or two later, so you'll be able to regulate it. How to teach autistic child the sense of time? This is a question from Venkata Kakarka. The best thing I would say is to see what is the child's level of understanding. And as I had told you, I had given you 3 levels where the child gets a feedback, is able to understand, is not able to understand. So one thing we have to understand is, if I want the child to understand the sense of time, the starting point is the child differentiates between day and night. Okay, only when the child is able to appreciate day and night, when it's around 1.5 to 2 years old, the child will be eventually able to see time, okay, and read time and follow time as well, right? So we have to see what is the current level of the child before I can give you more information on this. And if you are able to, uh, a timer is a good way of helping the child understand that there is a time limit for all the activities, and we has to do it within that time. But again, without knowing what is the level of the child, it's difficult for me to give you a very specific answer to that particular question. I have another question from Priyanka Marbaha. Hello, sir. How do you suggest using visual schedules help in task completion, especially for taking out or ending tasks like park, garden, or mall? Uh, Definitely, I'm a strong supporter of visual schedules. So, visual schedule is definitely help a child to understand the task completion. And the basic difference here is that the visual schedule will tell you what is next. Most of the times we see children with autism, they may have very good attention span. You give them a task, they do it with full concentration, and the moment they are done, they are everywhere. They just move out of the place. It happens to children in the school when they complete work faster than others, and then they're like disturbing the class. So the visual schedule is good in teaching a child what is next. So the task completion parameter is actually a subset of visual schedule. For if you have a schedule, say for example, the child has to sit on a swing. The schedule, the next task is he has to do some writing. He has to copy a list of 10 words, and then the next is he has to play with a ball. Now, I would say this is the schedule. First is swing, next is the uh, writing, and third is the ball. So within that, for swing, it would be repetitive. It would be a non-ending task. So I'll use a alarm. And then for writing, it's a list of 10 words. So it's an ending task. So I don't have to use anything specific, but I have to make sure that I don't give the word one by one. I have to give a list of the words, and assuming that the child is um, has the skills to actually identify, understand that a word list, if it is given, have to complete the word list. And then the child goes in the ball game where there is a target throw. Now for a target throw, I would always recommend a target throw over ball throwing and catching. Essentially, because when a child is throwing a ball at me and I'm throwing the ball back to the child, you will find that it is a non-ending task, and it's after a time it becomes very boring. If I use a target throw, I stand next to a target. The child has to throw the ball at a target, and then I once he's hit the target, and I give him 10 balls so that he hits one by one with the balls. If the ball has hit the target, I keep the ball with me. If not, I give the ball back to the child. So in that sense, I'm going to throw the ball back to the child, and the child is also going to learn catching. And at the same time, when he is not successfully understands that the same ball comes back to me again and again. So there's no end to this particular task. And to be fair on the child, I might adjust the distance and try to make him successful. And so in that sense, it is always it becomes an ending task. Now I have 10 balls, it becomes an ending task. So I hope I've answered your question. The next question by the same parent, or I'm not sure if she's a parent. A child 5 years ADHD earlier was responding and following well with alarm, especially for outdoor parks. Okay, but recently has been resistant to follow that. Okay, and also behavior problem like hitting mom has been really troublesome now. Okay, now for this particular child, he was using alarm, he was following it, and something has changed. Either the alarm system was not consistently followed, or the child has found a way out. In the sense, like if I don't follow the alarm system, I'm being allowed to continue playing in the park. Now, if that is the situation, now we'll have to go back and be firm and consistent with that particular uh, strategy, and make sure that the child is able to do it. And the child is hitting the mom as well. Now we have to see why the child is hitting the mom, because most of the time that I see, a child getting into any kind of aggressive behavior is basically there's a conflict. The child wants to do something else and the parent wants to do something else. So you should never allow a child to hit you, and at the same time you see where the conflict is rising. Is it because you want him to do two things, as I had mentioned? When you look at a routine is a combination of a fixed time, place, and activity. So, which means the moment I want the child to brush his teeth, I always take him to the wash basin and brush. Now, if in a wash basin, you can comb your hair, you can also spit, you can wash your face, right? You can do a lot more things. But if you just stick on the use of wash basin to only brushing, and if you have two or three, you can use one for brushing, one for washing the face and things like that. The child, the moment you take the child to the wash basin, he knows what is being expected. Similarly, it is important that you take a child to the cot, to the bed at night at 11 p.m. He wants to jump on the bed, so you should never allow that. Which means there should be a separate bed on the floor for jumping. If you cannot buy a trampoline, you use a bed. In such a case, the child knows what is expected. If at night when we go to bed, it's only for sleeping, no bedtime stories, no music, and no games, and no talking there. It's only for sleep. So the child follows the routine there. Another question from Bimalendu Mandal. For tasks that a child does not like or has difficulty like reproducing some sound or word, how do you encourage quality? That's a good question. The first thing that I would like to see is the child making a good effort, and is the child able to understand the demands of the task? And if the child has difficulty, then I would say it's not actually possible to get the required quality. If the child does not like, I can still get the quality, because only when the quality is achieved or the quality is being produced, the task gets completed. In such a situation, I will always try to keep my demand very, very low, in which means like if the child understands well, I say, you make this particular sound once or do this activity or 20 times. Both are things which he does not like. So the child would more likely choose a task which he has to do only once than do something which he does not like for 20 times. Okay, that depends again on the ability of the child to understand and the intellectual levels. And the other way would be to um, give him a feedback, like what kind of the sound that he has produced, is it good enough or not? In this webinar, when I'm talking, I hear get a feedback from the microphone levels. It tells me how many dots I'm able to, is my volume. Okay. Similarly, when you look into this in music systems, you have those lines, right? Based on the volume, you see the number of lines going up and down. So that is a visual feedback for me. So if you want a child to make more sound, allow, and so you can always make the child see where it is. I can always make a line on the screen of a equalizer and show him this is where it is supposed to be. And if it crosses this, then I put a coin inside. So I'll try to give him a feedback. This essentially depends on the feedback the child is able to understand, and they're able to once the child is able to understand the feedback, then I'm able to get the desired response. Again, this another question from Bimalendu Mandal would be, my daughter struggles with identification or labeling of pictures. She starts a tantrum the moment we start the activity. This task needs repetition till she gets it right. So it frustrates her, I feel. Please suggest any strategy for this. Now the problem is the child is has over a period of time has learned that this is something that I do not like, and it would be, I would definitely want to know is the child is able to identify pictures. Now the pictures is at a level of, it's a 2 dimension, and the real objects are 3 dimensional objects. So is the child able to match or identify a 3 dimension object with a 2 dimension picture? In other words, can a child identify or match a real apple with the picture of an apple? If that is the case, then it means the child is able to understand pictures. So that would be my first question. I want to ascertain that a child understand pictures. Once I've done that, then the next thing that I would like to do is see if where is the motivation level of the child. What are the things that she likes to do? Instead of asking her to label pictures of dogs and animals, and which doesn't actually have a direct correlation to what she is doing on a day-to-day basis, can I motivate the child to uh, tell me the picture of, show me a picture of milk because she likes to drink milk, or to show me the picture of a park before we I take her to the park. So in that sense, she understands that if I point to the picture of a park, then mommy will take me to the park. So instead of trying to do all at one go, I would again try to see if I can use it depending on the context, and see if she's able to understand this, that she has to point to the picture when I ask her, and only then whatever she wants, she will get it. In that sense, I'm actually not repeating it all in one go. I'm using the same concept but at different times of the day, and trying to make it more and more meaningful. And once I understand that she is able to identify the picture of a park, she's able to identify the picture of milk, I may get into this, in which I ask her five different combinations, and she has to pick up milk every time. So in that sense, it will be easier for the child. Next question from Madhura Padmakar. Can you suggest different ways to increase attention span? We have discussed in detail, and this is a very generic question. So the webinar, the recording of the webinar will be available for you shortly, and my discussions are also available in the website autismconnect.com. So as you could see in the chat, you will find the links to those articles. So I'm sure you'll be able to read it. And if you have any questions, you can please get back to me on my email ID, or through Autism Connect. The next question from Mahesh M. Hi doctor, my son is 2 years 10 months, and when called by name he responds 2 out of 10 times, have relatively less eye contact. He has diagnosed as having sensory integration disorder. He is active child with normal gross motor IQ, but social skills and communication are low. So I guess your question is not very clear, but I assume that you want to know how to improve his eye contact and how to improve his social skills. For children and unnamed call response, the first thing I always tell parents is, if you want the child to respond to name calls, always call him with one particular name, because for a young kid who's less around 2 years and 2 to 3 years, you always tend to call him by different names. Mommy calls him like Munna and the or Jinukuti or something like that, and the father calls him some other name, and the grandparents call them to some other name. So first, make sure that you call, or everyone calls the child with the same name, which is going to be his official name. So there are no two names, one for school and one for home. It should be one name. Number two is that whenever you call him by the name, always sit right in front of the child, let's say at a distance of 2 feet, and call him. And when you call him, if he looks at you, he gets to benefit out of it. So what do I mean by this? You might be having a toy in your hand, and if he looks at it, he is likely to benefit from the toy, right? He can take it and play with it. Or you can have a snack that he really likes to eat. In such a situation, you always make sure that he benefits out of it. And when you call him, don't call him saying that you call him by his name and say, I have a toy, look at the toy. For example, let me take a name. If I say the child's name is Mahesh, and let's not understand that, don't say Mahesh look toy or Mahesh toy. No, nothing like that. Always call him only by his name. If he turns and looks at you, he gets to benefit. Now do this consistently over the next 15 days, and again, you can do it in different levels. I'm a big fan of levels. What do I mean by that? Level is level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. Just like in video games, you can always modify the complexity of any task into levels, and in such a case it will be easier for you to know where the child is and what is the next step that you want to take the child through. So a child with less eye contact, level 1, you will be sitting right in front of him and calling him by name. Level 2, once he's finished level 1, he is able to do it consistently. Go to level 2, you call him by the sides. Level 3, you call him from the back. Level 4, you call him from the next room. So you will gradually find that by increasing the distance and the complexity, the child starts responding better and better. And as I told you, start from easy, go to more and more complex task. Next question, Julie Khadapkar. When should we reduce verbal feedback as few kids become approval dependent? Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And I always try to keep my verbal feedback as minimum as possible. And I would say if you want the child, if you are giving a task for a child to make him do 5 times or 10 times, more than two is not required. And there have been times when a child is always looking at me and wanting a feedback, then I would always sit behind the child and see if he's able to do it. And I found that to be pretty successful as well. And for some children, I would just stop looking at their eyes and just keep looking at uh, the board or the puzzle and wait for them to finish it. And in such instances, I would always want to keep the number of items pretty low, which means I even in a piggy bank, I just take one particular coin and just keep it. He has to do it only once. And the child, once he's done it, he can come out. And I will wait. I will not give a feedback and see if he's able to complete it. And most of the times if the child and simplify the task so much that it doesn't require a feedback, and all we can do is wait, so that now the child has got so much kind of experience in getting a feedback from the adult. We want the child to change ways, and he has to now start focusing on doing a task without depending on an approval from an adult. The next question from Sujal Sivarajan. Hello, sir. How can we identify the sensory input that a child is seeking? Yes, as I had mentioned, we have different senses. We all know about the five senses: vision, auditory, touch, smell, and taste. In addition to that, we have two more: the vestibular and the proprioception. So, if a child is auditory seeking, so we always see that in a variety of ways. For example, the child likes a lot of music. He makes sound with a lot of toys. Whatever toy you give, he'll try to bang it on the floor, or he purposely makes music. These children may be have a habit of self-talking, so they talk to themselves. They just keep singing all the time. So that these are all examples of auditory seeking. A child who is tactile seeking may put his hand in the mouth or put toys in the mouth all the time, and then he might be feeling people's hairs or his own body. He might be rubbing his own body, or you can find that when he's walking on the road, he is like keeping his hands on the motorcycle or even rubbing against the walls of the compound. So you will find that the child shows that he is seeking touch in a variety of ways. So depending on the child's behavior, all we have to check is there a consistency and is it present across uh, activities and domains. I hope I've answered your questions, and there's much more you can do. You can always look into a sensory checklist from the internet and see where your child is. That will give you some idea. The next question is I think it's a similar question. It's a repetition. The question from Sendil Kumar. Most of these kids are unable to comprehend what the parents are saying, or sometimes they are stubborn to do tasks. How do we handle such situations? The first thing that we need to focus on is simplify the task so much that they should think twice before saying no. So most of these kids are unable to comprehend. So if they're not able to comprehend, simplify the task. So we'll give them the benefit of doubt and try to simplify the task and see what is it they are not able to understand. And uh, you can always use visual schedules to help them understand what is being expected out of them. Questions: can I get the activities by email? Now these kind of activities you can find everywhere, and this the session is not about activities. The session is more about trying to understand how we can help. So you can, any activity that you choose, you can always make it into an ending task, a non-ending task, or a repetitive task, and choose accordingly. So it's not about activities. And any activities, the best way to get an activity is to, you can find a book, the Out of Sync Child Has Fun. It will give you a lot of ideas about activities. This is a book by Carol Kranowitz. I repeat, The Out of Sync Child Has Fun by Carol Kranowitz. A few more questions, and as you of the child is looking at, mother while doing an activity, how to make him look at the activity? I think this is a question which is a similar one. And I think this would be the last question, after which I would encourage you to send the questions to my email, and I'll be happy to answer them in person. And so if the child is not looking at the activity and looking at you, always keep your face neutral, do not show emotions, simplify the task, make sure the child is able to understand the demands of the task, and if the child is not able to understand the demand of the task, modify the task and choose something else that the child is able to understand, which has a direct correlation. The example between piggy bank and the buttoning. So if you take that example, you'll be able to understand that modifying the task itself is very helpful for the child. For paucity of time, I think I'll have to close the session. I'm very happy with the number of questions you have asked, and please post these questions separately to my email ID. It is srishtitherapycenter@gmail.com, and I'll be happy to answer them. And I would like to thank Autism Connect, the team, for organizing this webinar, and I hope it was useful for the parents worldwide. Thank you very much.